Hi, everyone, and welcome to the I Am Landscape Growth Podcast, where entrepreneurs help entrepreneurs grow faster, better, and stronger in the green industry. From leadership to sales to recruiting and operational excellence, we cover the topics holding entrepreneurs back and share how to get past those bottlenecks with the best in the industry. I'm your host, Rob Murray, co founder and CEO of Intrigue, a digital marketing company focused on helping landscape companies grow. So sit back and enjoy the show. Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the I Am Landscape Growth Podcast. Today, I have our guest, Mr. Shane Humble from Complete Property Maintenance. Shane, thank you so much for doing this. Appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah, morning, Rob. Thank you. Glad to be here. I appreciate you asking me to step on with you today.
Give the crowd quick summary overview. How you got in this industry and where you at today? What's the focus of your company?
Sure. Kind of a funny story. I was sold drilling rigs for earth stabilization. Um, these drilling rigs were manufactured in Europe. The euro came into effect, and all of the rigs I sold went up 30-40%, no longer competitive. The company closed its doors 6 months after, and I needed to find something quick. I had a baby on the way, and my wife jokingly said to me, "You need to find something recession proof." And I'm like, "Yeah, like that exists." She's like, "No, like something like, like you can't stop grass from growing, like things like that." And I just said, "I'm gonna cut grass." And she's like, "Wait, you're 30? You're gonna cut grass? Like, how's that gonna go over with your parents,
It
you
was
know?"
your idea.
Yeah, I thought I got a pass, right? So that's how it started. And I already knew strata with soil with the drilling rigs, kind of understood the ecology of how that all played in. And bought a truck, lawnmower, and a trailer and started cutting grass.
Amazing. And now, what's the business? Where are you at? What's the size? What's the focus of the company?
Yeah, so right now we are and back then I did individual residences, just onesie twosies here and there. Now we are solely a HOA landscape maintenance contractor. We've got 530 employees, 5 branches, and absolutely love what I do. It's been just a whirlwind of ups and downs, but a lot of fun along the way.
How many employees did you say?
530.
Okay, I want to make sure that people hear that because how do you get so many people? But we'll get to that in a minute. Um, so the primary theme of the podcast, as we were just talking about, is what's the primary growth constraint holding entrepreneurs back in the green industry? You had a pretty unique perspective on this, so why don't we just get right into it? Like, what do you see as the bottleneck holding people back from growing?
Sure. So, I'm in a market that has really changed over the last couple of years. Let's kind of bring it to the COVID, era. Um, there was on average 1,000 people moving into Florida every day. So, that translated to that 18 month of like, over 500,000 people moving into South Florida. Construction was going crazy, lots of growth opportunities. And, we all know that in this marketplace, our labor pool kind of fluctuates between construction and landscape, depending on season, fluctuality of growth. So we share the same labor pool. Um, and at the same time, landscape company values seem to be going up. We were almost, we were considered like garbage men at one point, and that's not a put down to the garbage men because they're hardworking. But as a company, we're guys that cut grass. It's not what do I say, rocket, scientists, we're not physics, what did I say? I don't even want to downplay it because there is a lot more to it than that. But all of a sudden, there seemed to be this real interest in recurring revenue that maintenance contractors provided, like a Netflix, I guess. Um, so our biggest kind of constraint that we found was that these, equity firms were coming in, buying up our competitors and needed to grow quickly. And the challenge became they were buying work, getting the work, and then in turn finding they needed to buy the labor because they didn't, we don't carry excess employees around with our business model. It
No,
just
of course not.
so we can't afford it. We're working off of small margins and large volume. So, the labor rate got falsely kind of puffed up. And it was that was creating an issue down here in our marketplace.
And so then
you see, essentially like, private equity or venture capital at some level coming in and buying up companies, consolidating, then cash hungry, so they need to fulfill the work, so they're grabbing employees, maybe paying more than they need to because they're under the gun to get the work done. They have to deliver, or they're not going to be generating cash at all, and then that's not good for anybody on a shareholder perspective. So then, how do you respond to that?
So, you focus on, the 80/20 rule. You try to make sure you're taking care of your existing customer base. That also gives you, I don't want to say the guaranteed extra revenue with your mulch or flowers or landscape enhancements, but that's really where you need to then shift your focus to. Growth is going to happen, and I strongly believe that it's like a construction company building a high rise. They don't know that the people are going to look to move into this building. So it's the theory of like empty space. If you create the empty space, a void, something's going to fill it. And that's kind of how we are. That's kind of, we have the intention. If we create the opportunity of finding the right labor is also going to come with it. So we just focus on the positive aspect of intention.
Okay, well, I mean, that's amazing. And I mean, it says a lot about mindset, which I'm going to circle back to in a minute. However, you did say something that's kind of interesting because a lot of people we talk to when it comes to growth, they kind of correlate that with new business. And you kind of just went a little bit of a different direction. You said, hey, when things got a little bit rough and the market was a little bit volatile or, just difficult, rough waters, we just doubled down and looked into our core business, taking care of our core customers. So, first of all, why is that the perspective? And second of all, what did you do specifically to do that?
Sure. So we found that our HOAs weren't holding meetings. They were, this was so new into the COVID era that they weren't having the meetings, or they were exploring Zoom. And, there wasn't these approvals taking place for these large projects. However, they were still doing the basic enhancements. They were still putting flowers at the entrance. They were still mulching the common areas. They were doing the basics that potentially may have gotten bid out before, but there wasn't this movement towards getting multiple bids. It was more of, hey, we don't want to bring new people into our communities. There was this fear. So we said, we've got to really just focus on those that we already have within our base. Not that we have not done that before. Our average tenure with our clients is somewhere around 12 years. So
That's big.
yeah, it's huge. And, and that's with our employee base as well. I mean, just in my office, our admin staff share, I think it's 77 years amongst the five, our office staff here. So we're big on that. So yeah, doubling down on that, and we're always going to have fluctuation. Boards change, property management companies change, and it can literally be a vote that determines whether or not we stay or go. So we've got to make everyone happy versus just, even the complainer. We want to flip because one day they may be on the board, and we have to appreciate that.
Oh, cool perspective, right? Because it's like a resident that has
Stranger.
nothing to do with decision making today, but tomorrow
Oh,
very much could. Yeah.
tomorrow's calling our fate.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, well, that's like a crazy part of the whole HOA business model. So then what did you do then, like as a team, to go take care of these folks and really double down on that relationship that then leads to like a 12-year average lifetime value of a customer?
Presence on the site. A lot of time, during that period, people were remote, but not us. We were considered essential. So we were allowed to be on the properties. And there was such an efficiency gained because we were focused in on those particular properties that the managers have, that we weren't out driving around, going to pick up material, going, because there wasn't a lot of that happening. So we just found ourselves focused, staying on site, boots on the ground, being in front of the customer more, and the customer was now home. Their offices had been shut down.
Sure, yeah, you're on a Zoom call watching somebody mow, mulch, whatever outside your window, right?
Yep. And, and suddenly also we did on the same, opposite end, Rob, we gained, I don't know, 20,000 landscape experts who are now stuck looking out of their window that didn't care if the shrub was 2 inches higher or not, but now they did. So it created more opportunity to talk to the residents.
And then so was there any like because of the increase of visibility and presence and then the interactions I would think of customers, like did you do any training, that kind of stuff about how to talk to people, how to listen? Like how did that go with people that are talking to more customers more times?
Yeah, I don't think there was, I don't recall a meeting specific about, do we approach differently? How do we do? It was already something within our account managers they've done on a daily basis. They just found themselves having more time to do it, just because they were dialed into those, the accounts that they had at the time.
So then you take this, COVID era, which we could say we're at the end of. How has the tide changed in the last 6, 12 months from your perspective?
Yeah, there's, along with the construction, we found there has been a definite opening of opportunities. Um, and we've only got, I think currently, I think we have like 68 to 80 clients, something like that. So it's a small base, but they're larger HOAs, anywhere from 50 homes up to 1,800.
Huge.
So yeah, we've kind of dialed in our customer base, and we're not chasing the accounts just to pay into overhead, and we're more looking at who's going to be a great fit for us. It's almost like we've started interviewing the customers versus the other way around, because we know now really dialed in what we're looking for.
And so then what was that journey like, going from being interviewed to then interviewing? Like, how did you flip that, and how is it working? Because I mean, you go from, mowing a couple of lawns to 530 staff, you're doing something right.
I think it's just asking the right questions. You want to find out what's your turnaround time on a board decision. Do you find then, because that'll tell you if there's discourse within the board, if there's a 7-person board and these votes aren't, kind of moving quickly, you realize there's some animosity amongst those board members and it's not cohesive. So, you just start looking at those avenues to know if it's a right fit.
Well, and that's interesting, right? Because then I guess if there's not cohesion, then if a vote does get passed, you come in, there's probably going to be somebody sitting there trying to get someone out because they're not happy with the decision that was made. That's got nothing to do with the company, but then you're in this kind of weird, volatile relationship that maybe you don't want to be a part of. Is that kind of the idea?
Exactly. And you can't take it personally, because why would you invalidate somebody's relationship that they may have with another landscape owner?
Sure.
We're pulling from the same labor force, we're using the same equipment. Typically we're providing a very similar service. It comes down to understanding the needs, meeting the expectations, and describing the expectations right up front. Because that's what kills you. If you tell them you're going to do everything and you're telling them you're going to do it 100% right, you're letting yourself down. I usually start off telling them the first 60 to 90 days, it's nothing like a honeymoon. I'm going to hit your fence. I'm going to tear your screen. I'm realizing where the nuances are of your property. So
Right.
like, you set it up right from the start and say, I'm only going to get better after 6 months. It doesn't tail off. This is when we actually get good.
Yeah, it's more like dancing, right? You're going to step on some toes to start
Yeah.
with, and eventually you're going to start finding the groove, right?
Right,
And
exactly.
then being honest about it. A lot of people necessarily want to be vulnerable with their mistakes up front.
Well, it's like, we talk about immigration, and it's one of those topics that's like, very, like, you don't want to approach it, but you do. They'll ask me that question right off. Saying, oh, how many of your employees speak English? Or is my supervisor going to speak English? And, so I'm in this board meeting or I'm in a town hall, and I'll say to them like, oh, hey, how many of you guys have kids? And 90% of the time they raise their hands. Oh, I have kids. Yeah, I have kids. I said, oh, great. I'm like, how many of you have kids that you have encouraged to go into the landscape industry or cut grass? Every one of them drops their hands. I've never had one person doing this for 20 plus years tell me, oh, I did. I told my son or daughter to go into landscaping. And I'm like, so who's doing this work? I'm like, if you're not pushing your kids into it, you represent 90% of, people with kids. So the whole topic of English speaking goes away. You just have to
What a
set.
beautiful way, though. It's like judo, right? Like it's their energy bringing it up, and you're just bringing it back to them. I think that's brilliant.
Correct.
So there's something that you've woven into everything that you're doing, and this mindset thing that you talked a little bit about, and being intentional. Um, what do you mean by that, and how can you describe what that has done for you to others listening?
Sure. I think if you approach life with a positivity, and you put your mind to that place, as opposed to, I don't want to say, I'll say it, marinating. I would prefer to marinate in the positive outcome as opposed to the negative. So if you put your intention talking of all the things that can go wrong, they're going to happen. But if you talk about and think about all the things that can go right, that also is going to happen. So, we feel as if we do the right thing on a daily basis, and we approach it with that mindset, that will be our outcome. And the team that I have around me is fantastic. I mean, they are my branch managers to account manager to the guy carrying the rake are all integral to this all working. And if you don't let them know that and treat them with that, they will feel it. It'll work its way back up. And I think all of the guys, and I just the 3 branch managers that I have now are all 10 plus years here. So they've got it, and I can be a dad, which is, delegate and disappear. I tell them I'm their dad. I said it, and I hope that then they run with the decision, because I know what I don't know. That's what's, I think, stronger than knowing what I know.
I mean, I believe there's a lot. I mean, the idea too of focusing on the positive. It's like that saying, "What where attention goes, energy flows."
Yeah.
And it's so easy to get wrapped up in the negative. Because and we talk about this idea even here about if you there's a tendency if someone were to post a YouTube video as an example, and there's 1,000 thumbs up and 1 thumb down, the producer of said content will look at the thumb down. What do they say?
Yeah.
And it's so easy to focus on the negative. And it needs to be, I think, a choice. I think it's just also a bit of human nature, like what's wrong, and we're all worried creatures. And I think there's a little bit of evolution, because if you're not worried, you probably got eaten by a tiger at some point in the evolutionary history. So I think that taking that decision though to make an intention towards focusing on positivity is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And then it might sound a little, foo-foo to somebody listening to this now, but then if you hear underlying messages of Shane, what you've been saying, things like my admin has got a combined 77 years, my branch manager has been with me with 10 years. I hear time and time again the growth constraint is getting and keeping great staff. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing with your team outside? Like, you take this positivity focus, and then how does that come to life for folks and then turn into this outcome of tenured staff?
Sure. So I think the involvement of asking their decision, or getting them involved in the decision, which, it's kind of, like you said, commonplace. I think that we, might be one of those, 101, let's make sure the staff feels involved. But I have a perfect example. Just recently, we have somebody involved in special project implementation, Jimmy, who, goes out and he looks and, just recently attended the Elevate. And his mission was to find software. We don't use a landscape management software. So goes out into the world. He's trying to find XYZ, what works for us. So one of those initiatives recently was, okay, we're tracking our vehicles and we're rewarding drivers for their scores on, hard braking, hard. So we thought, what, this was a great fit. The next evolution of that was, okay, we're going to add forward and rear facing cameras in the dash. And we just kind of maybe didn't give our branch managers enough input. And we said, we're going to do this. We're going to roll this out for everybody. Even myself is going to do it, and got this major pushback. And they had thought of things that we never thought of. And I went, you know what, this was one of those times I didn't ask for their input, because we just thought it was the everyone's going to feel safer knowing that they're being monitored. There's a voice in there saying, hey, your eyes aren't focused on the steering wheel, you're looking at your phone, whatever it may be. But we took out the personal interaction with them, and they gave us major kickback. So we halted the program, and it was like one of those, this is what happens when you get off focus. Like we didn't do that right. And now we're rolling it out with their kind of input and why they thought it was a good reason or a bad reason. And I think it's going to be more successful. So it's getting that involvement, I think, is what helps keep our key players in place.
That's cool. I was talking to somebody just on Tuesday or Wednesday, and the whole theme around, if you want buy-in, you got to get weigh-in.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
I think that's really cool perspective, because it's a good program.
Yep.
And it needs to happen at some level. And you're rolling it back out, but with more success because you had some folks weigh in with some perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we thought the justification was, you're going to be safer. Listen, we're spending X amount of our, dollars here towards this program. how can it be selfish? Like we've got this big outlay every year. Like, why would you think it? And they explained to us perfectly why it didn't work for them, and we got it. So, you know, it's just not undervaluing your staff's opinions on every decision you make, to be honest.
That's super cool. And I think this, you know, there was a lot of years where I would hear leaders talk about slowing down to speed up.
Yeah.
And I was like, what do you mean slowing down to speed up? That makes no sense. But then when I realized over time was that if I were to make a decision without anybody's perspective, it often went very poorly. And taking the time to get people together is kind of like that slingshot. You're just tightening it up so you can go farther, faster. I think you just described a really great use case of how that comes to life. Um, Shane, you said something a couple minutes ago about delegate and disappear. Um, you know, some folks, when learning to delegate, and me included, have done things like, here you go, bye, and didn't necessarily provide context. So I think that was the biggest piece of feedback I had for a year or two about I need to bring more context into decision making and what's going on.
Sure.
How does delegate and disappear work?
Sure. So if you know that you have, if it's a repetitive kind of idea, or you know, we're taking on a new account, and you can provide the framework, the basis of the specifications for the contract, and they've done this time and time again. The last thing I want to do is micromanage them on how we're going to transition it, how we're bringing it on, what to do. It becomes more successful the more involvement they have on their own. And it's not to say that I wouldn't do that on a task like, oh, hey, you know what, we're bringing on ADP for payroll, and you know there's a lengthy process for the mobile app in order to get set up. Here's your phone, here's the app. Good luck. Not one of those. You know that you know that's 40 phone calls and 40 sessions sitting in with the ADP rep, but so not definitely not in that regards, but I get it. Yeah, no, I hope I didn't make it sound like I'm just give an order and then leave. You know.
No, I got the impression that it's not just that.
Yeah.
Um, but I find a lot of people, when trying to learn how to delegate, don't necessarily give people all the information they need. And it seems like if you've got staff sitting around for this long at leadership levels and mid-management levels, you're delegating well. And so I was just curious from your experience, if there's something that you could share with the audience about how to maybe like speed up the learning curve and how to delegate well. What would you say to somebody from what you've been through?
Yes, set the expectations, set the level of confidence that you have in them. Because that's the biggest thing, you know, and I'll tie this into, you know, when I first started, I had I was myself and 3 employees, a lot of small landscape company before hurricanes hit down here in South Florida. My wife and I thought we're gonna move out of state. We're not doing this hurricane thing. I put my
Yeah.
business, yeah, put my business for sale, and I had an immediate full price offer from a franchise, a Canadian-based franchise. And I'm like, this is great. Everything's falling into place. I had the intention because I already picked out a house. So I thought I'm going to sell the business, and it's happening. We go to sign the contract on the house, and it was like 37 degrees. My wife went, wait, it gets that cold in Georgia? Like, we can't do this. So I had to run back to Florida, you know, tail between my legs, and tell this franchise that I can't sell. Um, and it was one of those where the broker said, well, you had full price commission. You're going to have to pay me my full fee. So I went back to the franchise. It was Clintar. It's a Canadian based, franchise. And I said, listen, I can't sell. And, they're like, well, why don't you stay on and buy back in? So that's what I did. I stayed, I bought back in, and it was one of those situations where, like, every turn gives you a new challenge. And if you can work through what the problems are, there's typically a solution. And
Mm.
that delegate is kind of the same mentality. You provided a problem, you find the solution, and it typically emerges through many hours of discussion. And it's kind of, I think, how we work here. It's open door policy. My door is never shut. It is shut now for this podcast, but otherwise it's wide open. And everyone just comes in, and we figure it out.
So you go from 4 folks to then how many when the Clintar group got involved?
So that's where the confidence comes in. So, I would say that, I was positive mindset, but confidence is always something that's in the back of your mind. Can you do this? Can you, are you doing it right? And, Clintar didn't have any exposure here at all in the United States. We were the first US franchise. And my partner was a guy by the name of Simon, who had a best friend from Brampton who had a Clintar franchise. And, Simon wanted to bring that down here. So we partnered up and painted and decaled all of our trucks this bright Clintar green. And for whatever reason, it gave us this confidence boost that we're part of something bigger. But we weren't. We weren't pushing any snow.
Right, right. Yeah,
We didn't
different
have,
business.
yeah, different business. We didn't have the Home Depot contract. So, but we found ourselves within a matter, I think it was, we were the fastest growing Clintar branch in their history. And we got it up to 100 employees in, I think it was like 7 years.
So then, can you speak a little bit to some of the breaking points that you might have experienced going from 4 to 100, and like how you needed to evolve as a leader in order to like have that kind of a group working with you?
You know, I was still pulling weeds, no matter, like, I'd go onto a property and pull weeds, and people would now come up to me and say, "Boss, you can't do that. Stop." And I'm like, "No, this is what I do." I struggled to move from the labor to I still don't even like saying boss. I prefer head gardener. Like that was a struggle for me. That was a problem that I faced, was learning how to become somebody who wasn't the one doing the work, but finding the work, pricing work, bidding the work, and then allowing those that were in that I've hired to do that role actually do the role. So that was a challenge. And financially, we didn't have backing. We were, paying royalties. And those, the margin here in South Florida is slim. So paying a royalty made it even more challenging to compete. So financially, it was difficult, and probably our toughest growth, because the equipment was all around then. That wasn't a problem to find. Labor was plentiful then. So yeah, I think it was really just changing the mindset of what I was supposed to do on a daily basis.
I mean, I heard a title of a book in what you just said, From Labor to Leader. I don't know. I don't know if you've got it on your plan to maybe share your experience through writing. But I know that's a lot of people struggle with this thing, from going from the tools to the office to like a CEO who is
Right.
really helping like cast the vision, and getting people aligned. So you go from 4 to 100 to 530. What is like your main focus in the organization today as at that level?
Uh, I think it's really just focusing on the right work. We don't provide landscape installation to builders and we won't, at least while I'm here. I think you need to just fully understand what it is you do well, focus on it, not try to dilute your labor force into doing things that you may not be able to explain properly. So I think for us, it's to focus on what we do it the best we can do at a fair price. We're never the low bidder. We're typically not the high bidder. We typically fall in the middle. And I think it's because we've understood that we provide all of the products and services that are in the contract. And the end result is shown with what we do. And that's, I think, needs to remain the focus here.
It's interesting. There's a couple of ideas that come from that. One is around the idea of like what you say no to is almost more strategic than what you say yes to. And when you simplify what you focus on, people get really good at it. So did you try other things earlier on and it didn't go so well, and then maybe backed out of it and say, hey, we got to double down on our core focus? Or how did you get that kind of laser focus on what you're up to today?
Yeah, more recently, within the last few years, there's been this major push to put synthetic turf in backyards of these HOAs,
Right.
for the residents. And we were missing the boat because we were focused on maintenance. But we're seeing these synthetic truck companies parked on all the streets that we're cutting the grass out up front, where we're doing the hedges, we're fertilizing, we're doing the pest control, the irrigation, and we're missing a piece that's becoming extremely popular. So we brought somebody on to kind of head that up, and it it didn't get the traction that we would have liked, because what we found is if we had a Monday where 3 people, 4 people didn't show up at a branch, the one thing we were going to pull from was that area to make sure we continued to do what we were good at, which was the maintenance. So we were constantly robbing from this synthetic turf division to take care of what we were contractually obligated to. And it didn't work. It has not worked where it's, I don't know that we're going to try to rekindle that. I've got a son who's currently in college who has told me he would love to do landscape lighting. And he's a couple years away from graduating. So I thought, you know what? Okay, we're not going to make a push on that now, but maybe if he does still want to do that in 2 years from now, that could be an avenue that we pursue. And it's a 1 or 2 or 3 person, kind of role until it grows. So it could work.
Yeah, that's cool. It's also interesting because you just implied that you need a leader to start something new instead of just diverting focus from what you're doing now and then trying to do more. So that was kind of implied in what you said, because you brought in somebody for synthetic. You're thinking with lighting, you got to have a leader that's going to come in and drive it. What's that perspective about?
I think we're in an industry where it's very easy. People are nervous about training somebody to the point or level to where they can leave you to go start their own. But if it's like, do I hire just well enough that they're going to stay and not too good that they're going to go? But that shouldn't be it. It should just be that, if they leave, that means they're leaving for a better opportunity. And ultimately, what do you want for your employees? The best opportunity they can have. So we've lost many people because they're so good that they can go do this on their own. So great. We encourage it. We push it. So why not bring a leader that can, have that same, and if they take the business and go elsewhere, okay, there's so much work here in South Florida that it's not necessarily a concern. And I've given actual jobs to these employees that have left that are maybe too small for us, but in his niche or her niche, and it comes around. It all comes around. So
I love it, and the idea too that, like, I think some people just think they can do more all the time, and eventually you end up getting stretched too thin. So if you don't have somebody coming to lead the charge on a new initiative, it could just fizzle. Even if it's a good fit. And the idea, though, like, I mean, it's through and through in the 40 minutes we've been talking about positivity and mindset around the abundance and what's possible. You hear so many people griping about how someone was there as a right hand for 6 or 7 years and they start their own thing, and I'm competing with my direct competitor. And you're sitting there being like, no, let's just grow people, help people have better lives, be their best self. If they go and do their own thing, that's almost like a win, because you've grown somebody to the point where they have the confidence to step out on their own. I think there's a lot people can learn from that approach, because you went from 4 to 530 with the mindset of helping people grow. So I just think that's beautiful, really.
Yeah, parents definitely instilled that. Very positive people.
Awesome. So resource, an author, a speaker, somebody that kind of hits you over the head, parents, but maybe somebody outside of that that you draw inspiration from that you'd want to share with people, what would you say?
Yeah, no, my parents. So my dad is an author. He passed away. My mom, I have a biological dad in England. My mom is here. My mom is just the center of positivity. Meditates, just great all around leader. And then my dad was an author, wrote self-help books. I've got one of his quotes on my back. It says, "It's never crowded along the extra mile." You just work hard, just put it in, and do what you say you're going to do. Show up when you say you're going to show up, and things fall in place. So, I would definitely just say that that's kind of the mantra for here, is just go that extra mile.
It's never crowded on the extra mile.
Never crowded along the extra mile.
Oh man, that's so good. I'm writing that down because I got to use that for when we share this. Shane, thank you so much for doing this, man. This is just a great 45 minutes, man. Appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. Appreciate it.
And thanks for everybody listening to another episode of the I'm Landscape Growth Podcast.